All right, it is now time to take full creative control over your camera by learning how to shoot in manual mode. It sounds like a daunting task, doesn't it? Where do you start? Which camera settings should you set first? ISO, aperture, or shutter speed? Then, once you figure out one setting, how do you decide on the other two to get the right exposure? Well, fear not. Once you're done with this tutorial, you'll know exactly how to shoot in full manual mode to achieve your creative vision and get the proper exposure, because I'm going to give you step-by-step instructions. All right, grab your camera and let's put it in manual mode. To do so, change your dial to the letter M, and now you're in manual mode. So here we go. Step 1, choose your ISO based on your available light. So remember, try to use the lowest ISO number possible for the brightness of the available light. Step 2, next, you have to decide on your creative vision for the photo you want to create. Do you want to freeze or blur the action? Do you want a small or large depth of field? Which one of those is the most important? Step 3, if the depth of field is the most important element, set your aperture accordingly, or if freezing or blurring the action is more important, well, set your shutter speed accordingly. Step 4, now it's time to set the third camera setting based on your creative vision to get the proper exposure, and the secret tool that you will use to help you do that is, well, it's not really a secret. So what is it? Well, we talked about this tool in a previous tutorial, and it's called a light meter. So previously, when you worked in aperture and shutter priority modes, the light meter wasn't visible, but now that you're in manual mode, look through your viewfinder and you'll see multiple dashed lines that look something like this. So that is the secret tool to help you determine if you have the correct exposure, and depending on your camera, you might have a plus sign on the right or it might be on the left. So here's how it works. If the marker is dead center, then you can expect that your exposure will be good. If the marker is on the positive side, then your image will be overexposed, and it will be underexposed if the marker is on the negative side. So the goal, of course, is to have a good exposure, and you need to adjust your camera settings until the marker is in the center. The challenge is to balance the camera settings based on your creative vision. So what I recommend doing is starting with the camera setting that will not affect what you want to achieve creatively. For example, if a shallow depth of field is the most important, then adjust your shutter speed until the marker aligns to the center. But if you end up with a shutter speed that is too slow, then you can increase the ISO instead, or a combination of both the shutter speed and ISO. Now that you know how to shoot in manual mode, your exposures will be perfect every time. No, not really. Because remember, in previous tutorials, we covered how your camera sees things differently than you based on 18% gray and the different metering modes that alter how the light is, well, metered. That's why it's imperative that you understand the dynamic range of a scene and use the histogram to confirm the existing range of light to ensure you have a proper exposure based on what you're trying to photograph. So if you skipped any tutorials in this camera masterclass, then I recommend going back and watching everything. That way you will fully understand your camera, and then, and only then, will you be able to master your camera and exposures. If nothing else, I highly recommend the following 3 tutorials, which you can find in the description below, which are dynamic range versus tonal range, and the histogram parts 1 and 2, which will help you determine if you have captured all the detail of your scene, or in other words, if you have the right exposure. So, if you want to continue elevating your photographic skills, click right there to continue learning and creating better photos.